Dungeon Explorer might be one of the wilder, obscure games on the PC Engine. It's a game that was designed to showcase the PC Engine's abilities, though in this case, there's a solid game that was made as part of that. The thing that you need to know about Dungeon Explorer is that Gauntlet was a successful game in Japanese arcades. But thanks to circumstances that mostly come down to Atari and Nintendo feuding, no version of Gauntlet was released for a home console in Japan. So here we are in 1989, and one of the big selling points of the PC Engine was 5-player multiplayer. So why not just copy Gauntlet? Oh, make a few tweaks, a few expansions, things designed to appeal to the Japanese audience, but still be recognizably Gauntlet. And that's where Dungeon Explorer comes from. This is a game that wears those influences on its sleeve. And even in 1989, everyone recognized it for what it was, and nobody was denying anything. And as I said, Hudson added quite a bit to the Gauntlet formula. And you'll get that as soon as you start. Once you're past the screen that shows you an overview of the kingdom and all of the dungeons you'll visit, you're in a bar, and you have to hit the run button to bring up a menu where you can enter a password or create a new character. And by create a character, I mean pick one of 8 classes. Your options are Fighter, Thief, Warlock, Witch, Bard, Bishop, Elf, and Dwarf. In the US version, they changed Dwarf to Gnome for some reason, and misspelled Gnome. Everyone is rated on 4 stats: Agility, Attack, Stamina, and Intelligence. Agility is how fast you move, Attack is how much damage your regular weapon does, Stamina determines your maximum hit points, and Magic determines how effective your spells are. Every character has 2 spells, Black Magic and White Magic, and these are powered by potions that you'll find in the dungeon or drop from enemies. There are a couple of characters that have one of their spells in common with someone else. There are still 12 different magic abilities. Not all of these characters are created equally. Some of them are support characters whose abilities only really work if you're playing with a bunch of friends. Others can easily handle the game on their own. The fighter's probably the easiest one to start with, as his magic doubles his attack power or doubles his defense power. Since he's already the strongest in both of those categories, the fighter winds up outclassing anyone else. On the far end of the spectrum from him is the Bard. The Bard has the weakest attack, and his magic abilities are ones that will likely get you hit if you use them. He can either change the background music, or return the entire party back to the starting point. On the other hand, if you manage to persevere with the Bard, get him about a quarter of the way through the game, and then go to the correct location, then the Bard can change class to be a much more powerful character. But that start is going to be rough. Speaking of the music, you might have noticed something on the title screen. Dungeon Explorer proudly boasts of being in stereo. It's not the first console game with that feature. It seems like Atlus was very proud of the game's soundtrack, which was by Tsukasa Masuko, composer for the Megami Tensei series. Okay, you've picked out a character, and up to 4 other friends have also picked out their characters, so now it's time to start exploring some dungeons. Why would you want to explore dungeons? It's because a peaceful kingdom is getting ravaged by monsters, but hidden somewhere in it is Isla's Orb, a gem with the power to save the world. You start out in town, and first have to visit the king to get your current quest, which basically amounts to go to the next dungeon and kill the boss there. While you're running around, pressing button 2 will shoot your weapon, and if you press and hold button 2, then you will stand in place while firing. So make sure you don't have auto-fire enabled if you have one of those controllers. The game already auto-fires for you as fast as it will allow. Button 1 will cast whatever spell you have selected. But to use the spell, you have to have the appropriate potion, either white or black. When you find these lying around the dungeon, it is possible to destroy them by shooting them a few times. So you'll want to be cautious of that. Enemies emerge from enemy generators. And while the quantity of enemies that you'll find is never as overwhelming as you'll see in Gauntlet, it's still pretty easy to get overwhelmed in Dungeon Explorer if you don't destroy those fast. It's particularly a problem because most characters can only take 3 or 4 hits before they're down. If you do run out of health, by default you have 5 credits, and you can press run to jump right back into the game. The credits are indicated by the orbs that will appear above your status. If you run out of credits, then it's game over, and you have to write down your password. Then you have to reset the game because it doesn't just zip past this screen. Probably a good thing since it's giving you your character password. And you'll have to go back to the bar and enter that if you want to start again. The good news is progress is saved, and the way that Dungeon Explorer works, shortcuts open up after you complete each area, letting you make quick progress back to the point where you got stuck. You might have noticed that the characters have levels. However, they don't have experience points. Instead, you have to defeat a boss, or a few particularly tough enemies, and they'll drop crystals. These crystals will cycle between 4 different colors, each one matching a stat. Collect the crystal to increase the matching ability, and your level goes up. That also increases your maximum health and fully restores your health points at the same time. There's a few more things that enemies drop. You'll find items that increase one of your stats, though these aren't reflected in the password, so you'll lose that boost if you get a game over. There's also a potion that will restore some of your health, though it appears very rarely. Another potion that will make enemies run away from you, but not necessarily your friends. And an item that will give you an extra credit. The dungeons quickly become pretty complex in Dungeon Explorer. There's 16 in total, and they all have multiple floors connected by staircases. Traps abound in the game, though in many cases you can destroy the trap with concentrated firepower. Unfortunately, if you go slow, then a white fireball will emerge from an enemy generator and start chasing you down. If it touches you, then you die instantly. So you can't just stop, you have to keep moving. Relatively early on in the game, you'll find a princess locked up in prison, and if you manage to get her out of the cage, then she'll give you a password so that you can play as her. She's actually one of the more effective characters, and starts out at level 4, since you have to be level 4 when you reach her. That's one interesting thing about Dungeon Explorer. This game is designed so that you have a persistent character that you bring around to your friends' houses and build up over time. The game's not over when you defeat the final boss, because you can use your character's password to just hop into a friend's game and help them out. If you press the run button to pause the game, then you can switch your status display between your level, your stats, and your character's current password. All of these are things that you really don't need consistently, but that's how you find them if you need them. Dungeon Explorer had enough fans at the time that it eventually got a very late sequel on the PC Engine, coming out on CD-ROM kind of late in the system's lifespan. I found plenty of people who had fond memories of playing Dungeon Explorer with a bunch of their friends, but at the same time, it doesn't seem to come up a whole lot. It feels like this is a game that people remember fondly, but don't really want to revisit. My take on Dungeon Explorer is that it's a pretty fun spin on Gauntlet. Maybe its biggest stumbling block is that the first dungeon is the weakest part. They're trying to ease players into it. I think that as the game progresses, the dungeons become more and more interesting. I think it really shines in a group, when the people who have the group heal abilities can actually take advantage of those. I have a good time with Dungeon Explorer. It's one of those games that has a lot more to it than appears at first glance.